Number 7. Mona Fayez Montrage. In one of the latest Lonely Heart scams to make American headlines, a 30-year-old Ghanaian national named Mona Fayez Montrage is accused of swindling single men and women in the United States out of at least $2 million. According to federal prosecutors, Montrage was a member of an organized group of con artists from West Africa who targeted older Americans who lived alone between 2013 and 2019. Using false identities, the swindlers convinced unsuspecting singles that they were the ideal mate and faked romantic relationships for the sake of siphoning money from the victims. The scammers used a number of excuses to get their targets to transfer money, including needing to move gold into the US from abroad, to resolve criminal investigations, and to help non-existent American military personnel who are supposedly stationed overseas. In one case, Montrage allegedly persuaded a victim to send 2 wire transfers totaling $89,000, claiming that the money would go towards supporting her father's farm in Ghana. According to court documents, Montrage also convinced the victim that they were married by sending bogus paperwork. She showed off the spoils of her handsome profits on social media, at one point being one of the top 10 followed influencers in Ghana. Prosecutors claim that the ill-gotten funds were filtered into phony bank accounts, including one for a fake clothing company in the Bronx called For Real Designs. Montrage is also accused of laundering the swindled funds to other members of the con artist group. She was finally arrested in 2022 in the United Kingdom and has been extradited to the United States to face justice. According to the most recent available updates on the case, she's pleaded not guilty to wire fraud, money laundering, receipt of stolen money, and conspiracy. She was released to her aunt's residence in New Jersey on $500,000 bond. She's required to wear an ankle monitor and is only allowed to travel to certain parts of New York and New Jersey. And if convicted, Montrage could face up to 20 years in federal prison. Number 6. Kimberly Air. While responding to a call about a domestic disturbance in Paragould, Arkansas in July 2019, police arrived at the scene to find 23-year-old Kimberly Air with a swollen and bleeding lip. According to a probable cause affidavit, Air accused her fiancé of grabbing her by the hair and pushing her against a car. She also told officers that her fiancé had slapped her in the face and put her in a headlock. The next day, the young woman allegedly called law enforcement and admitted to lying about the assault. Court documents stated that Air confessed to hitting her fiancé first. She also said that her fiancé had pushed her, but that he didn't cause her facial injuries. According to Detective Lieutenant Rhonda Thomas, Air then blamed her son for her busted lip. Given the needless confusion, a judge greenlighted Air's arrest for filing a false report with a law enforcement agency, but unfortunately, the outcome of the case is unclear. Number 5. George Santos. In mid-2023, New York Representative George Santos was indicted on federal charges of wire fraud, money laundering, theft of public funds, lying to Congress, and more. The shocking allegations opened a can of worms when it came to exposing the full extent of the 34-year-old politician's lies and deception throughout his career, and new allegations are still coming to light. In fact, it would be impossible to list every single fib he's accused of telling in today's video. It all began in December 2022 when the New York Times questioned key parts of Santos's resume that also served as main selling points of his political campaign. According to the Times, both Citigroup and Goldman Sachs said they had no record of Santos ever working for them, despite his claims to the contrary. And while Santos claimed to have graduated from Baruch College in 2010, officials representing the institution said they couldn't find any such records. The questionable accolades continued to pile up when the IRS said it had no record of Santos's animal rescue group, Friends of Pets United, holding the tax-exempt status characteristic of a non-profit organization. Since the Times piece was published, Santos has been additionally accused of lying to get unemployment benefits, swindling a disabled veteran, lying about his grandparents being Holocaust victims, and spending campaign donors' money on designer duds. He's also lied about being the target of an assassination attempt. He's lied about where he went to high school and about working on Wall Street, and he even lied about the amount of his earnings and where his money comes from. According to New York Magazine, he inflated his value and bragged about yielding unheard-of profits on a $1.5 billion investment fund he supposedly managed. The financial firm DeVolder has no LinkedIn page and no transparently listed credentials, calling its legitimacy heavily into question. These are just some of the lies Santos is accused of telling, and there are surely more to come as the embarrassing scandal unfolds in public view. Number 4. Christopher Mamini. Christopher Mamini quit his job as the managing director of the Salt Lake City-based Pioneer Theater Company in August 2021 after he was called out for having a heavily exaggerated resume. His resignation came after a Fox 13 expose revealed glaring inconsistencies on his cred sheet that he had no respectable explanation for. Many of the false claims had helped him land his prestigious position at the Pioneer Theater Company, but Mamini blamed his lies on a mental illness rather than his desire for the high-ranking job. During a New York Times interview following his resignation, he confessed to being a habitual liar and claimed that he struggles to be honest in any and all aspects of life. He even said he lies to pretty much everyone he interacts with throughout his day. Furthermore, Mamini admitted that he hadn't even lied for no good reason, but apparently because he couldn't resist the urge to do so. The saddest part of the whole ruse was that Mamini racked up some real bragging rights at various points throughout his short-lived theater career. It was under his leadership that the National Yiddish Theater Folksbien's production of Fiddler on the Roof moved to one of off-Broadway's biggest venues. But he lied about having a master's degree from NYU, about participating in the development of popular video games and ad campaigns, and other credentials he claimed to have. And lying not only completely destroys a person's credibility, it overshadows any actual talent or skills they do have. Outside the job, Mamini claimed to have scaled Mount Everest, that he was born in Italy, and that he was having an extramarital affair with Kourtney Kardashian. But none of these things are true, yet he felt compelled to embellish on a compulsive scale. And while he swears that he's mentally ill and couldn't control himself, it's hard for many people to look at him as anything other than a liar. Number 3. Tracy Sh Hudsona. Tracy Sh Hudsona seemed like the perfect candidate for a job as the personal assistant of Joanna Kidd, the ex-wife of former NBA star Jason Kidd. In fact, as the owner of a concierge firm that catered to the rich and famous, she seemed overqualified for the position. But Joanna needed the help, and Tracy was happy to carve some time out of her busy schedule for the gig, which she began working in 2015. Tracy was an avid self-promoter. On her YouTube channel called Homeless Millionaires, she and her husband Darrell showcased their elite lifestyle, claiming that their line of work gave them access to the finer things in life. And that was true, but not in the honest and respectable way that the couple depicted. The plain and simple truth was that Tracy and Darrell lived like millionaires because she habitually stole her clients' identities, money, and credit, and unfortunately, Joanna was merely her latest victim. Joanna first realized that something was very wrong when her financial advisors cautioned her about her overspending. More than $300,000 of her money had been squandered in an alarmingly short period of time, and Tracy tearfully admitted to opening a credit card in Joanna's name and paying the bills with Joanna's money. She promised to pay the money back, and Joanna forgave Tracy and worked out a repayment plan. Tracy kept up with the payments faithfully, but unbeknownst to Joanna, she'd simply found a more clever way to steal money from her employer unnoticed. She accessed Joanna's laptop, filtered her financial notifications into her spam box, and made herself the primary facilitator of Joanna's accounts. And this time, Tracy siphoned around $1 million from her trusting friend, including from college funds meant for Joanna's children. By the time Joanna caught on to Tracy's fraudulent activity the second time, her credit had dropped into the 400s. She cut all ties with her dishonest employee and went to law enforcement, who were able to find plenty of evidence of Tracy's crimes simply by looking at her social media page, where she bragged constantly about her lavish lifestyle. It was easy to see that the money had been spent on expensive jewelry, phones, nightclubs, luxury hotels, restaurants, and other high-ticket amenities. Tracy pleaded guilty to wire fraud in 2022, and in early 2023, she was sentenced to 51 months in federal prison, which means she'll see freedom in a little over 4 years. And this isn't her first prison stint either. It's merely her latest, which leaves one to wonder what she'll do with her life following her release. Number 2. Sam Bankman-Fried. Investor and entrepreneur Sam Bankman-Fried, also known by his initials SBF, was once the poster child of young American success. At his peak, he was worth an estimated $26 billion. But his fame and fortune came tumbling down hard in late 2022 when his cryptocurrency exchange FTX and his trading firm Alameda Research both collapsed and went bankrupt. Bankman-Fried's estimated net worth quickly dropped to zero. His problems grew exponentially when he was charged with 8 federal counts, including wire fraud, commodities fraud, securities fraud, money laundering, and violating campaign finance law. In short, Bankman-Fried is accused of funneling customers' money into Alameda Research and using it in ways that people didn't know about or consent to, and he lost a lot of money doing it. He was initially released on a $250 million bond, but was thrown back in jail 8 months later over allegations of witness tampering. News reports have repeatedly described Bankman-Fried as a pathological liar who refuses to face the truth about himself. And in a series of self-pitying writings obtained by the New York Times from the 8 months he spent on house arrest, he seemed more devastated over the destruction of his public image than the fact that he could face decades in prison. He also hasn't seemed to accept that he caused some people to lose their entire life savings to bad investments that he depicted as both safe and lucrative. Bankman-Fried allegedly blamed several people for his personal shortcomings, including his ex-girlfriend, Caroline Ellison, and others who had appointed positions in his companies. One thing he's noticeably failed to do is take any responsibility whatsoever for the horrendous outcome of his failed business ventures and the multitudes of lives that have been ruined as a result. He also seemed to put the concept of consequences on the back burner, although he may be singing a different tune when his trial rolls around in early October 2023. In all fairness, several of Bankman-Fried's top advisors have been accused of crimes as well, and at least 3 have agreed to testify against him as part of their plea agreements. And now for number 1. But if you want to hear more bizarre and crazy stories, stay tuned after the video for some more content. Number 1. Gina Champion Kane. In what federal authorities described as a massive years-long Ponzi scheme, San Diego-based restaurateur and real estate magnate Gina Champion Kane swindled her unsuspecting clients out of an estimated $350 million by using her charm and reputation to her advantage. She convinced her investors that their money was being loaned to bar and restaurant owners at high interest rates and that they had no reason to believe otherwise. Champion Kane claimed that the money was needed for the upfront costs of pricey liquor licenses and that the funds were being safely stored in an escrow account. In reality, Champion Kane had once been a legitimate businesswoman, but she got greedy and she used a lot of her dishonestly obtained money to upkeep her lifestyle and her own businesses, many of which failed. She bought herself box seats to pro baseball and football games, cars, jewelry, and other luxuries, and used the money to pay her personal credit card bills. None of the money was loaned to other business owners like she claimed, and as the years wore on, she used funds from new investors to pay back old ones who were expecting their investments to come full circle. According to federal prosecutors, Champion Kane and her co-conspirators fabricated documents, forged signatures, and posed as third parties when investors tried to check the status of their accounts. And as with any Ponzi scheme, Champion Kane's way of doing business, described by the San Diego Union Tribune as an empire of lies, eventually collapsed under its own weight. As part of a plea agreement, Champion Kane admitted that she ordered employees to destroy evidence and take other measures to hide their activities after she learned that she was under investigation. She also tried to obtain a $150 million investment from an unsuspecting victim with plans to use it in an attempt to cover up her activities. Investigators nevertheless uncovered enough evidence to press criminal charges, and Champion Kane was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison for securities fraud, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy. In 2022, roughly a year into Champion Kane's prison sentence, the Union Tribune reported that she'd said very little about why she committed the massive fraud in the first place, especially since she was financially successful when she began the Ponzi scheme. In a deposition she provided in an unrelated case, in which she'd actually been a victim, she'd said, "I'm a deal maker. All I do is try to get deals built, make money for my investors, and hope all turns out well." In hindsight, it could perhaps provide a clue about what was going on in her mind when she became a criminal.
8. Richard Spencer. After separating from her husband Doug in 2010, 31-year-old Venus Stewart packed up the couple's 2 daughters and moved from Virginia back to her hometown in Michigan, where she stayed with her parents. And mysteriously, she went out to the mailbox one morning and never returned. Venus had just won custody of the children, leading investigators to suspect her estranged husband of being involved in her disappearance. Doug told them he was in Virginia when Venus vanished, and initially his alibi checked out. But surveillance footage of his alleged whereabouts that day showed a man claiming to be Doug wearing sunglasses and a hoodie with the hood pulled up. Witnesses admitted that they couldn't confirm whether the person in the video was Doug or not. Phone records revealed that Doug corresponded with the 20-year-old man from Delaware named Richard Spencer in the days leading up to Venus's disappearance. The two played Xbox together online and met face-to-face for the first time right before Venus went missing. Spencer admitted to wearing Doug's clothes and using his credit card to create a believable ally, while Doug drove to Michigan and murdered Venus. The initial plan was called off when Doug got pulled over in Ohio, and Spencer said he tried to avoid acting as an alibi a second time. However, Doug convinced him that his children were in danger, so he reluctantly went along with it. This time, the plan succeeded. Without a body, Spencer's testimony was key in convicting Doug of Venus's murder. In exchange for his willingness to testify, Spencer pleaded no contest to conspiracy to commit manslaughter and only served a year in jail. He broke down on the stand while recounting Doug's description of the murder, and he appeared to truly regret being pressured into having any involvement in the crime. Doug remained in denial about the murder until 2018, when he offered to lead authorities to Venus's remains in exchange for 3 Xboxes for his prison unit. With most of his appeals exhausted, it appears as though he finally accepted his reality and saw the negotiation as a way to make his living situation a little more bearable. 7. Cavarion Jordan. While hanging out with some friends at Presque Isle Bay in Erie, Pennsylvania one day in 2021, 18-year-old Cavarion Jordan jumped into the water. Unfortunately, he didn't know how to swim, and it wasn't long before he was in clear need of help. Jordan's friends tried to rescue him, but they weren't able to save his life. His death was ruled accidental, but his mother, Tracy Sh Hudsona, believed the peer pressure killed her son. She told local station WJET that Cavarion's friends urged him to jump into the water, even after he repeatedly told them they didn't know how to swim. Before jumping in, he warned his friends that if he looked like he was dying, they better save him. After seeing a video of the tragedy captured by a witness, Sh concluded that she didn't believe Cavarion's death was accidental. She took issue with the fact that his friends continued pressuring him to go in the water after he said multiple times that he couldn't swim. Sh told WJET that a parent of Cavarion's friends gave her money after the tragedy and offered to pay for his funeral. She suspected that the generosity came from a place of guilt, stating in her own words that perhaps the friend offered to pay for the funeral because they knew they were the reason her son was gone. Legal experts who weighed in on the matter disagreed that the money was given out of guilt and suggested that it may have been an expression of sympathy from one parent to another. They also speculated that it would be difficult to prove that Cavarion didn't voluntarily risk his life and doubted the family's ability to succeed in a lawsuit. 6. Stone Fultz. During his sophomore year at Bowling Green State University in 2021, 20-year-old Stone Fultz decided to join the Pi Kappa Alpha fraternity. He and other new members were told to wear suits to their initiation at the group's off-campus frat house, where they were blindfolded and led inside single file. Loud music blared, and they were pushed and yelled at by their higher-ups while being led into the basement. The blindfolds were then removed, and the new pledges were introduced to their assigned mentors, who were tasked with guiding the new members into their fraternity lifestyle. As part of their initiation, the young men were each given a bottle of liquor. They weren't explicitly told that they had to drink the entire bottle, but they were strongly pressured into it. Fultz downed a bottle of whiskey in just 18 minutes. Not surprisingly, he soon began vomiting and had trouble walking. 2 higher-ranking members drove him back to his apartment, where they stayed with him for a little while and then left. The young man's roommate arrived home to find him unconscious but breathing. He called Fultz's girlfriend, and the two of them looked after him. Things soon took a turn for the worse though when Fultz stopped breathing and turned blue. His girlfriend dialed 911 while the roommate performed CPR as they waited for first responders to arrive. Doctors were unable to save Fultz despite their best efforts. He was put on life support but he died 3 days later. Since then, his parents, Shari and Corey Fultz, have dedicated themselves to stomping out hazing on college campuses. They sued the university, but it wasn't about the money. The couple pursued the lowest amount required in order to file the lawsuit, $50,000, and were ultimately awarded a $3 million settlement. It was the biggest payout in a hazing case in Ohio history. 8 of the fraternity members were convicted on charges relating to the deadly hazing incident. They received sentences ranging from probation to 42 days in jail. 5. Kristen Cooper. A KFC delivery driver was working in the town of Mayaro on the island of Trinidad one night in 2023 when a man approached him pretending to be a customer who was waiting for their food. Suddenly, 3 other men rushed up to the scene and robbed the driver at gunpoint, taking his cash, cell phone, and the meal he was trying to deliver. According to a police report, responding officers took up strategic positions in pursuit of the suspects, who were hiding out in an abandoned house. When the two parties crossed paths, the officers ordered the suspects to surrender. But instead, the thieves opened fire and the cops shot back. 3 of the suspects were fatally shot, while the 4th suspect scaled a wall and fled the scene. A revolver and some used casings were allegedly found at the scene. The deceased suspects were identified as Zachary Gilbert, Antonio St. Rose, and Kristen Cooper. Some of their family members are challenging the officers' version of events and are wondering if the police used excessive force on the young men. Gilbert's cousin, Michelle Mohammed, told the Trinidad and Tobago Guardian that based on a witness report, the suspects were unarmed when they were shot by law enforcement. She also doubted his involvement in the robbery, wondering if perhaps he was just in the wrong place at the wrong time. The police, on the other hand, see the situation differently and maintain that they abided by the department's use of force policy. One of the suspects, Antonio St. Rose, was particularly well known among law enforcement. When the deadly exchange of gunfire occurred, he'd recently served a 3-year prison sentence for armed robbery and gun charges. Zachary Gilbert had no criminal record, according to his family, who said that he wasn't involved in any illegal activity that they knew of. The youngest man involved, Kristen Cooper, stood out among investigators because he had no criminal involvement whatsoever. For this reason, they believe he may have been pressured into helping his friends commit the robbery that led to the fatal shootout with police. Cooper was known to stay out of trouble and was extremely well liked in his community, and it seemed out of character for him to be involved in a violent crime. Unfortunately, one bad decision ended his life, serving as a sobering reminder to others that it's important not to let oneself be easily influenced. 4. Jesus Camario. Jesus Camario got involved in the Sereno Street Gang at a young age. During a visit to a 7-Eleven in Sereno territory one day in 2016, Camario and 3 other members encountered 2 men from the rival Norteño gang. A fight broke out between the 2 parties and the Sereno members got into their car and fled the scene. Afterwards, one of the Serenos, Jorge, worried that the gang might lose respect for being driven out of their own territory. So, the group retrieved a gun and began driving around in search of their rivals, but they had a change of plans when their vehicle got a flat tire. While they were changing the tire, the Norteños approached them and challenged them to a fight. One of the Norteños, 19-year-old Sulpicio Rios, lunged at Camario, who responded by pulling a gun from his waistband and firing 3 bullets. Rios tried to run, but he collapsed and eventually died. Camario then fired 2 more shots at another gang member as he fled on foot. In court, Camario's defense lawyer presented evidence from a brain development expert who argued that young, undeveloped minds are especially susceptible to peer pressure. A psychologist described the defendant as a troubled adolescent with an uncertain sense of self, who would benefit from the resources he would be able to access in juvenile court. But the prosecutors managed to get the case transferred to the regular court system based on the nature of the crime, and as a result, Camario was tried as an adult. He was convicted of second-degree murder and attempted murder and was initially sentenced to 47 years to life. However, Camario won a re-sentencing hearing and had his term reduced to 42 years to life. And apparently, he's appealing again in hopes of further reducing his sentence. 3. Mitchell Hewitt. In early 2016, a young farmhand from New Zealand named Mitchell Hewitt got drunk with some friends, which resulted in tragic consequences. The group took a large supply of alcohol with them to Lake Kinnear on the country's southern island for what was supposed to be a fun time. Hewitt was an inexperienced drinker, but he funneled beers and played drinking games with his friends that day until he lost consciousness. Everyone drank heavily, and nobody seemed to realize that Hewitt was in grave danger after he blacked out from a combination of beer, vodka, and Midori melon liquor. They simply thought he'd passed out drunk, which is a normal thing that happens at parties when someone has a little too much to drink. But Hewitt had way too much to drink, and by the time his friends noticed that something was seriously wrong and tried to revive him, he'd already choked to death on his own vomit. A medical exam revealed that his blood alcohol content was nearly 7 times the country's limit for driving. Sergeant Kevin Tiernan told the New Zealand-based media outlet Stuff that Hewitt's death was the result of binge drinking at its worst. He described the situation as a lot of young people not drinking socially, but drinking stupidly. A coroner's inquest concluded that Hewitt's friends pressurized him to drink excessively during the gathering. The report highlighted the senseless tragedy as a sad illustration of the prevalent drinking culture in New Zealand, and it mentioned the importance of young people understanding the dangers of alcohol. Hewitt's mother, Jan, said that she harbored no resentment toward the people who supplied the alcohol. But the authorities felt differently and charged 2 suspects with supplying alcohol to an underage person. Unfortunately, their punishment remains unclear. 2. The murder of Zachary Wood. In what police described as a massive bloodletting event, a trio of killers bludgeoned 23-year-old Zachary Wood to death at his home in Wichita Falls, Texas in 2022. Authorities accused 27-year-old Peyton Collier, 18-year-old Ronnie Lang, and 28-year-old William Bell of carrying out the gruesome murder, and they believe 21-year-old Ashley Esselborn cheered the killers on. The suspects allegedly attacked Wood because they believed he stole drugs and money from them. While encouraging the violence from the sidelines, Esselborn reportedly demanded to know where the stolen items were. All 4 suspects were charged with first-degree murder as a result. Ronnie Lang pleaded guilty and was sentenced to 50 years in prison, while the other 3 cases are ongoing. Esselborn remains behind bars on a $100,000 bond, and Peyton Collier is being held on a $1 million bond. Bell posted a $200,000 bond and was released pending the outcome of the case. Hopefully, justice for Zachary Wood will be seen in the near future. 1. TikTok trend nearly kills teen. After arriving at his school in Kansas City, Missouri, one day in 2022, a young man named Jonah suddenly passed out. Upon receiving a call from a school deputy, his mother, Siobhan Foreman, rushed to the scene. When she arrived, Jonah was unresponsive. She described the terrifying sight she encountered in an interview with Fox 4, stating that Jonah's eyes were wide open and had rolled into the back of his head. He was taken to the hospital and thankfully, he survived the ordeal. Jonah said that a classmate had pressured him into taking a so-called happy pill, which appeared to be the latest dangerous challenge that was trending on TikTok at the time. Foreman described happy pills as a homemade concoction of over-the-top medicines that allegedly makes people hallucinate. A toxicology test showed that Jonah had Benadryl in his system. It's unclear what else was in the pill, but Foreman said that he almost died after taking it. Jonah said that the classmate was pressuring him to try the pill, and that he took it so they would leave him alone. A month earlier, his mother had reported the same student to the school for pressuring Jonah to try marijuana. Hopefully, the incident was a wake-up call for both of the teens.
Would you rather spend months working alongside a habitual liar who tells the truth about nothing, or someone with unbearable body odor? Let us know your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.